in our Old Testament reading this week, some of you may have read it, I don't know. Old Hezekiah is the king of Israel. And this story is in Scripture 3 times in the Old Testament, so it must be a pretty powerful story, right? It must be meant to be heard and known, but it's one of those that we don't hear that much about. Old Hezekiah's been faithful king of Israel, and Assyria is just out there just doing whatever they want to do, kind of like some of these nations in our present day world. They just seem to be untamable, unbeatable. And the old king of Assyria is out there with his troops, and they're just routing and pilfering and pillaging. And he kind of gets a little ego trip going on, kind of like old Napoleon, some of that. He thinks he's unbeatable, right? So, and his name, I think he must have made it through Texas at some point, because his name is Snatcherib. Old Snatcherib. That's what I call him. Sennacherib, but it's easier just Snatcherib. He's trying to go through a barbecue joint and snatch a rib. Anyway, that makes it easier to remember anyway. So old Snatcherib sends his envoy to, Jerusalem and he shouts out all kinds of curses against God and Hezekiah at the wall, and just says, y'all think you can depend on your God, and we beat everybody and their gods all around. What makes you think you and your God can stand up to us and to old Snatcherib? Because he's going to come eat at your barbecue joint pretty quick. Anyway, Hezekiah, what he did, he went and he laid it out before the Lord, right? I mean, he goes and he tears his clothes and goes before the Lord. And he said, Lord, it's like he says. They've whipped everybody and their cousin all around the land. And he says he's going to come over here and whip us too. So we can't do anything about it. What you going to do about it? And the Lord said, you know what? You just wait and see what I'm going to do. And old Snatcherib woke up one morning out there in his camp out yonder with all them mighty men of Assyria, and he looked around, and 185,000 of them were dead, had died during the night. So he gets on his mule, and he goes back to Babylon, and lo and behold, he's murdered by his 2 sons, worshiping at the temple to his God, not long after that. Now that's kind of some power. Power is what we're talking about today. You know what? For those of us who know God, who have the Spirit of the living God living within us, you are empowered with, as Paul says in his prayer to God for this church in Ephesus, may you be empowered with inner strength. It's funny, the word that he uses here, the Greek word, strengthen you with power through his Spirit in your inner being. That word's only used one other time, and it's by Paul in Romans, and it's where he says, I love God with all my heart, all my heart. Your inner being is your heart. It's inside of you. Now, you may not be the strongest person physically. You may not be the strongest person mentally or emotionally. You may, be prone to, having issues there and those kind of things. But the living God lives in you. And he can give you the spirit of strength to endure, to persevere, to hang on, and to trust in him, to not let go, to just give you that inner strength and that love of him. That I liken it to, imagine if your heart had a hand, okay, and that hand is reaching up and grabbing hold of God. Sometimes when you're in prayer, maybe you ought to try that. Just imagine that the hand of your heart is reaching up and grabbing hold of God. Try that. I do from time to time. And it helps me. It helps me to get some inner strength, right? It comes from God. Old Corrie ten Boom, y'all remember, she was taken to one of those concentration camps by the Nazis. She was a Christian. She wasn't a Jew. She was taken there for harboring Jews, for hiding them up in her attic. Her and her whole family. And her sister would end up dying. I don't remember, some of her family members died in the concentration camp. And after the war was over, she went and was speaking as a believer who God had given inner strength to endure that. And she went, and there was one of those Nazi guards that had been so harsh to her and her sister while they were incarcerated. And this man came up to her after the meeting where she was speaking and just spoke to her as if they were old friends. And she said she couldn't, in her own strength, she couldn't reach out and grab his hand. She said, God, you're going to have to love this man for me because I can't do it. And she said, well, as soon as she said that prayer in her own mind, as she reached out to God with her heart and grabbed God by the hand, her hand shot out to his. And she was able to love him in spite of what he had done to them. Can you imagine? God gives us that. Now, empowered by God's love, oh my goodness, Paul talks about may your roots go down deep into God, into his heart. May you draw from that love that is unsearchable and unendable. May you get strength and whatever you need from God, directly from him. May you draw that up from him. Is that not a beautiful metaphor? My goodness. How beautiful is that? I want to put that on my wall, I think. That's a beautiful picture. That's something we can't do in and of our strength. But guess what? If you're a child of God, you can. You can do this. Quit trying to live in your own strength. Draw from God. He will give you what you need. And he goes on to pray for divine understanding. You know, the Hubble telescope was launched in 1990. Some of you remember that. Some of us are. And that telescope, my goodness, it was billions of dollars that was spent on that, and it was launched up there. And, you know, the first images came back and they were like, oh no, there's something wrong. There was a flaw in the mirror, you know. It was messed up. It was built to the wrong specs. Somehow somebody messed up. And it was built to the wrong specs. So the pictures that came back were blurred. So you know what they had to do? They had to send astronauts up there a few years later, and they had to go in there and fix it. They had to go in there and work on that mirror. And you know what? It worked. And the images that came from that after that, they were in sharp focus. And that telescope can see over 10 billion light years away. And you know what a light year is, right? It means what it's seeing 10 billion light years away happened 10 billion light years ago. 10 billion years ago, I'm sorry. So it's seeing images that happened way in the past, but it's just that light is just now getting to the Hubble telescope. It's incomprehensible, how vast the universe is and how awesomely unfathomable that it is. But what I think happened to us in our hearts is Jesus had to come in and fix the mirror in our heart. He had to come in and fix that flaw that's in our hearts so that we could understand how great, how high, how wide, and how deep is God's love. How unfathomably rich, beyond our wildest imagining, God is. And how He cares for you and for me. This amazing God we can't even measure. But Christ has come in and fixed that mirror in our heart so that we can see and understand. We can comprehend it now. We can begin to know what God has done for us. We're empowered to be filled. My son Bobby went to the gas station there in Livingston one day, and we just got him that little old car, a little old Mustang too, and he just put him a little booming stereo in that thing, and he goes and sticks the gas handle in the gas tank, turns it on, and he sits back down in his car and starts boom, 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 as the gas shoots out and floods the parking lot. Somebody finally pulls up on the road and says, "Hey, your tank is full and it's blowing gas everywhere." And he's like, oh. So he gets out and, turns off the gas. They had to call the fire department out there to hose off the driveway, because, somebody come out with a cigarette, it wouldn't have been pretty, right? Oh, Lord. And what God has done for us, y'all, is if you can imagine that vast universe and God's love that is bigger and greater than that, has somehow been shoehorned into you and me. Somehow there's a big funnel and God's pouring that into you and to me. That vast love, that unfathomable love and grace and mercy has been put into us, each and every one of us. That's what Paul is saying. May you be filled with everything good from God, that God may be glorified. Is that good news?
Amen.
That is the good news. God loved you and I so much that He wanted that for us. He wanted to give us Himself. My goodness. Can you measure that? Can you comprehend it? Can you get your arms around that? It's unfathomably good. So don't let this old world beat you down when you leave out from here. You've got the living God in you. He lives in you. Hold on to that. Grab hold of that with your heart and trust in Him. Let your roots go down into Him and draw from that strength, because you've been given divine wisdom and understanding to be able to comprehend it. And there's some folks out there that's mirrors haven't been polished and fixed yet, And they need to know too. So let's shine that light, right? Let's shine that light. Are you ready for it? You ready? All right. But you do. You do. That's what Christ came for. So that you could know God. So that you could live in His fullness.